You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hello and welcome. It's TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed. I am your TV Guidance Counselor. Happy Friday, everybody. It's a brand new episode of the show. Welcome, and if you are checking the show out for the first time because of my guest today, Mr. Dan Savage, welcome to the show. I think you'll enjoy it very much. The concept of the show is that I am a stand-up comedian from Boston, Massachusetts, which is not a conceptual idea. That's a true fact. I own every edition of TV Guide magazine. A guest chooses an edition, and they go through it, and we talk about their historical viewing choices. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun conversation. Been doing the show for almost 2 years now, and it's a great way for me to get to talk to people like Dan Savage and have really interesting conversations about historical television, cultural studies, just fun stories about people growing up, hearing some things from people who you may be very familiar with their work that you may not have heard before. We have a new episode every Wednesday, but occasionally when I am lucky enough to grab extra guests because they've come through Boston here, I put out extra editions on Fridays, and that was the case here. Dan was in town doing a live edition of his Savage Lovecast at the Wilbur Theater, and he was gracious enough to grant me a bit of his time to talk about TV circa 1980. Really enjoyed talking to Dan. He's obviously a very smart guy, very interesting guy, very insightful. If you're not familiar with his work, you should check it out, but I suspect most of you are. And I think you will really enjoy hearing my conversation with Dan. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Dan Savage.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Dan Savage, how are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you so much for doing this.
It was a really intriguing premise. I couldn't resist.
It is an odd premise. I like that. And it's funny, too, because one of the things that I've found that when you go back far enough, no matter where people are at this point in their life, what their leanings are or thoughts, they all watch the same stuff at some point.
Well, there was only the same stuff on to watch.
Yeah.
There weren't, like today, 450 different scripted television programs on top of everything else. And there were only 2 or 3 or 4 channels.
Yeah.
And PBS was all reruns of Charlie Chaplin movies. It was a much more innocent time.
Sometimes Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom. I like Zoom as well.
Boston's own Zoom. It's funny the things people from Boston have pride in that they shouldn't, and the things that they should that they don't. Like, I want some towny dickhead to be like, fucking Zoom kid. Would be really, but it sadly will never happen. So you grew up in Chicago area?
Yeah, Chicago.
Okay.
In the city, not the area.
Okay, actual
The
city.
Yeah,
all right,
the
so you were
actual
in
city.
the heart of the Bob Newhart zone.
Bob Newhart lived in a fancier part of Chicago, Miracle Mile, Michigan Avenue, sort of Oprah land, pre-Oprah.
Okay.
We were far north side, Irish Catholic, Rogers Park.
So the Bonnie Hunt area of Chicago, I would probably call
Yeah,
it.
Bonnie Hunt. Yeah, absolutely.
I know 3 parts of Chicago: Bonnie Hunt, Newhart, and Cabrini Green. That is it.
What's Cabrini Green? One Day at a Time?
Cabrini Green was One Day at a Time and the Candyman movies.
Ah, okay.
So I'm like, okay, I only know things from movies pretty much. And you have, what, 3 siblings? Or
Yeah, I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister.
Okay, so you're right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to campaign for what you wanted to watch, or were you kind of along for the ride?
It was easier to get to agreement on what to watch just because there wasn't so many options.
Right.
So you were really picking between ABC, CBS, and NBC at any given time. And WGN in Chicago.
Yeah, Superstation.
Yeah. But we all kind of gravitated toward the same garbage. My older brothers and my dad liked sports. So every once in a while we would have to watch the Cubs or the Bears, which as a young pre-gay kid would make me want to jump off the roof. And then every once in a while the Olympics would come along, or the political conventions would come along and wipe out everything else on television. And those were dark and depressing days.
Yeah, absolutely. I lived in England for a bit in the early 2000s, and I had forgotten how Sundays were the worst TV day here for years, because there it still was.
Uh-huh.
It was literally like horse racing and snooker.
It's almost like they want you to leave the house.
Yeah, it was so weird. And to your point earlier, you had no options, and not watching TV was not even an option. Like, no one ever even thought of that as an option.
Well, we thought of not watching TV because we were lucky enough to grow up in the city. We weren't like our friends, some of whom we had friends who moved away from the city, because I'm old enough that I was there for White Flight, except my family didn't flee. And so a lot of our friends moved out to the burbs, and they were really fucked when there was nothing on TV, because there was also nothing to leave the house for.
Right. You couldn't walk to a theater.
You couldn't walk to a theater. You couldn't, if your parents would drive you to a mall, which then became a lever your parents controlled you with about where they would drive you. And so they had to sit in their suburban tract homes and watch TV. We could, when there was nothing on TV, walk to the beach.
Right.
We could walk to the Granada movie theater or the Adelphi movie theater. We could walk up Clark Street and Devon and Sheridan Road, and there was tons to do and tons of trouble to get into, and we could jump on the L and be anywhere in the city in a half an hour or 45 minutes.
Were you watching a lot of those suburban sitcoms and it was completely alien to you because you were a city kid?
Yeah. I chose a TV guide from 1980, and that's the Reagan Revolution. That's when really John Hughes movies, all this crap came out, lionizing, centering, as the social justice kids might say today, the lives and the experiences of these suburban kids. In a way, the 70s was kind of, before 1980 was the pinnacle of portrayals of urban life in sitcoms.
Absolutely.
Baretta, which is not a sitcom, but there,
One
even one
funny
day at a time.
Unintentionally.
Yeah, now it is. Now, knowing what we know now, don't
do
the
Norman
crime if you won't do
Lear
the time.
era, it was all there, and I always on this show lament the loss of the blue collar sitcom because we stopped. All TV shows became aspirational in the 90s, or became cartoons of poverty, like Two Broke Girls, Married with Children,
and always temporary poverty.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
they're going to figure this out, and one day they will be rich, and you don't have to worry about them anymore.
It's the American dream,
right? The American scam.
Yeah,
that if you convince everybody that everybody's eventually going to be rich, then nobody's going to support progressive taxation or a robust social safety net.
Yeah.
Like this lie that we're told by television, by our political leaders, is an intentional one.
Absolutely.
And is meant to, suck the dicks of the Koch brothers ultimately.
Right. And I think that the 80s, to your point, exactly. Around this time is when we started to see that shift.
And what I would see in the 70s, I would see my life reflected back at me on TV a lot, in sitcoms and TV movies and 1 hour dramas, Starsky and Hutch. And then it all disappeared. And then it was, like you said, all aspirational. The last really great working class sitcom was Roseanne, and that was 25 years ago.
Absolutely. And I always say that. It really was. There were a few attempts. There was a show called Townies with Molly Ringwald that actually Dana Gould worked on that was good, and there's an episode, a Thanksgiving episode, where they have no money, and the last line in it is this woman's like, I'm going to write a bad check for pizza, and we're going to have people ask you what the worst Thanksgiving you ever had was. This will be it. And it was so I'm like, I think I've had that Thanksgiving as a kid growing up around here. But no one wanted to watch that. They wanted pure escapism.
I just worked on a sitcom for ABC where I'm one of 8 executive producers. It is not based on my life, which a lot of people keep saying. And I didn't write it or direct it. So I had some input, and what I wanted to do, what we originally talked about, was something a little like along the lines of Roseanne. Roseanne was the counterpoint to the Cosby Show. Yeah. Not to invoke the C word.
Yeah.
It was working class as opposed to upper middle class or really aspirational. And it was just really hard to, and that's all gone. Like there's no sense of this being a working class family in the final product, the sitcom, which is really good.
Right.
But there's no sense of being a working class family. And I actually found myself in a position one time when they were scripting one of the episodes where this is a family of 5, mom doesn't work, dad's a Chicago cop. They're not rolling in it. They shouldn't be rolling in it, right?
Unless he's on the take.
And there's a plot point, which I'm sure he's not. And there's a plot point where they have to get rid of a computer or get a computer away, and they grab it and throw it into the street, and it's destroyed. And I sent them a note. I don't think a working class family would destroy a $2,000 computer impulsively.
Yeah. It's the thing about Roseanne that I especially gravitated towards was, and again, this is with the loss, as shows have gotten less blue collar, they've gotten more sort of spiteful or hateful, or characters have gotten more like mean-spirited in a weird way.
Because you have to create conflict and struggle somehow.
Yeah.
And so it all has to be interpersonal as opposed to Roseanne trying to figure out how to buy food, pay the rent, buy her kids shoes.
Right. And that show at the time was controversial because people thought it was mean-spirited. But when you look back at it, it's all gallows humor and a true sort of ball-busting love that the family has.
I thought that was a great show. It's not one of the shows from this era, from the TV guide I picked, but I thought Roseanne was, until the last couple seasons when it
turned into ab-fab.
Yeah, when it kind of lost its way. But I thought it was amazing. And I thought it was, there's my life. That's what my house looked like growing up.
Same here.
And that's what my family acted like. And you don't see this on TV often either. Roseanne and Dan were funny on purpose.
Yeah.
They were trying to crack each other up. They were making jokes, gallows humor, dark moments. They were trying to lighten the load by being funny for and at each other, sometimes telling jokes at the other's expense. And it was all very loving. And that's also something you don't see on TV very often, where people who are knowingly, intentionally funny and not trying to break up the studio audience, but trying to break up the person with whom they live.
Yeah, you get why they love each other in that way. It makes sense.
Because what you see on TV, sitcoms, is somebody says something funny, but the person that they're saying it to doesn't react.
Right.
Because it's not funny to them, and the studio audience or the laugh track goes crazy.
Yeah.
Or in Modern Family's case, there's no laugh track. At home, we laugh. And what I just saw, I saw on Roseanne, my family, my mom and dad taking the piss out of each other, and all of us kids being rude to each other and shitty to each other and trying to get a laugh from the parents at the expense of the sibling.
But if an outside force is against one of the people in the family, then they all rally against it.
Exactly.
It's that you can't. It's my family. I can say it.
It was such a good show.
And also, you now may get a show with a husband like Dan who looks like Dan, but the wife would be super hot and 20 years younger than him. And you would
talk about aspirational.
Yeah, and you would never have like a young hot 20-year-old dude married to a woman that looks like Roseanne on a show in the opposite way. It just wouldn't.
Well, you have Melissa McCarthy's show where you have two unconventionally attractive people who are together, who are kind of a match.
Which stands out as odd.
Right. That's really rare. It's really rare to see a woman in a sitcom who isn't an interchangeable Barbie bot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where is the wife from that Jim Belushi show these days?
Courtney Thorne-Smith.
Yeah, where is she?
She is, I think, just sitting back and counting stacks of money.
Well, good for her, because I don't think that's lightning strikes twice for you in that kind of role.
She's also hit the age of 40 when Hollywood decides that you have to play mothers.
Or a DA.
Yeah, a DA or just like some shrew or the president. That's very aspirational.
The Secretary of State.
Yeah. Well, I always think that the funniest example, although sad, is Sally Field, where she was literally the love interest for Tom Hanks in the movie Punchline in 1987. In 1990, she played Tom Hanks' mother in Forrest Gump.
I feel like we should lay on the floor for a minute. Light a little candle for our culture, what it does for women,
like
to women.
3 years later, she's hot, she's my mother. That's it. It's such a short
36
window.
months.
Yeah, that's all it takes. So 1980, we still, I think we're getting some of this 70s stuff, but the dream of the 70s was dying, and people started sort of regressing into this fantasy world more, I think. I think we grew into Love Boat more than we grew into Starsky and Hutch or the Norman Lear type shows.
Right.
Which is not great.
We had Archie's Place, No Longer All in the Family.
Yeah.
In 1980. Maude, I think, was still on the air.
Maude was at the very tail end and had really stopped with like the controversial
No more abortions for Maude.
Racism.
And a couple of spin-offs from the Mary Tyler Moore show.
Yes, including Lou Grant.
Lou Grant and Rhoda. Those were both kind of urban-ish
Phyllis.
shows. And Phyllis. I loved Phyllis. But yeah, it really was, let's change the subject. Chips, Fantasy Island, Family, which is the issue I chose, has a family on the cover. These sort of alternate reality shows.
But even Family was one of the first serious shows with a gay character.
Which
didn't one of the sons come out in the show?
No, that's Dynasty.
Is it Dynasty?
Yeah.
No, you know what I'm thinking of? American Family, the documentary that was on PBS, The Loud Family.
Lance Loud.
Yes.
That was a reality show. He came streaming out on PBS.
Yes, that was around the same year, but not on Family proper.
There was no gay characters in Family. Even though with the hole I burned into Leif Garrett when he was on the show, the way I stared at him, it should have telepathically somehow turned him gay. It didn't happen.
He just became a
heroin
addict who put his best friend in a wheelchair.
Yeah, he could have come over to the cock side, but he ran off with drugs.
That's what could have saved him. So what was the first thing that you wrote down there? You wrote Mary Tyler Moore down as we were talking here?
Yeah, Mary Tyler Moore was in repeats. People these days with Netflix and Hulu, repeats were sometimes as impactful and as first run.
Yeah, or more so sometimes.
I was watching Bewitched in repeats in the late 70s and 80s, and I Dream of Jeannie, and all the Lucille Ball shows, all the iterations of Lucille Ball sitcoms.
She got very terrifying when she went to color. The more colorful the Lucille Ball show, the more her voice terrified me, and it was just like,
Yeah, but I Love Lucy was still on in regular rotation. But yeah, so I wrote down Mary Tyler Moore. And for me now, looking back as a big homo and someone who thinks about these things, with the Mary Tyler Moore show, I think you can detect the beginning of a phenomenon I frequently describe. The gay lifestyle that social conservatives were condemning 30, 40 years ago is the lifestyle that almost all young straight people live these days.
Yeah.
what they feared was multiple partners, hedonistic pursuit of pleasure, not marrying, not settling down. And what you have now is straight people have taken everything that gay people did and just given it a new name, and they're all doing it now.
Yeah.
We had fuck buddies, you have friends with benefits. We had tricks, you have hookups. But this whole like live in an urban area, date a lot of people, have a lot of sex, don't buy a house, don't have a kid. That was the gay lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that was this hedonistic model for pleasure as the end goal that the religious right was like, oh my God, this is why we have to stop gay people because straight people are going to do this. And now straight people do it.
Right.
And you saw it first really kind of in Marty Tyler Moore shows.
And people complained about it. She's like, a single unmarried woman. Whoa, what?
Who's not miserable,
Yeah.
who's not being hit with sticks, but who is doing her thing and living in her area and has a community of friends and wasn't relying on a husband or a parent. And you know, her whole life didn't revolve around children. Marty Tyler Moore was a gay man.
Fair enough. It makes sense why Lou Grant was always hitting on her.
Exactly.
It was a little creepy when Lou Grant, they just sort of glommed in, like just
father
shoved in this
figure.
weird pseudo romance between the two just to give her something, and it was very, very strange.
I don't remember that. I blocked that out.
Oh yeah, you're lucky to have blocked that out. And they,
So I just want to finish my point. Now
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I look back at Marty Tyler Moore, I was like, oh, that's what they were freaking out about. And there's the first evidence of that sort of straight person living the quote unquote stereotypical gay lifestyle that you saw on television was really
Right.
kind of Marty Tyler Moore.
right, and you had that sexual revolution, as it were, in the 70s, which was really just like disco hedonism going to mainstream straight people, and things like Plato's Retreat and that very New York.
But you saw its fangs being the fangs being pulled from
Yeah.
it on television,
Yeah.
being tamed. You know, disco dance scenes in the Love Boat,
Yeah.
on the Love Boat, in their disco on the boat.
Absolutely.
Like they'd taken the disco, removed it from an urban area, pulled it out of Studio 54, out of New York,
Yeah, it's
and
suburban.
put it on a boat and floated it out to sea with only white people,
Right.
and one black bartender,
And they were literally
and
doing
occasionally Charo.
Charo and a couple whose marriage is saved by infidelity. Every single Love Boat, one of the stories is that
Actually, I've witnessed myself many marriages saved by infidelity.
on a boat.
Not on a boat.
Well,
usually
times have changed.
Yeah, not on a boat.
That's the one positive thing about Love Boat that they got right for thinking forward. So that makes sense. And when they did present a gay character on TV, and I think the first, in my mind, respectful gay character who was the main character in a sitcom, I'm completely discounting Billy Crystal's character on Soap, was...
Who, by some miracle, turned out to be bi.
Yes.
Met a girl.
Yes, she turned him. You know,
That's
he was
right,
just
but-
incorrect.
And you saw that also on Dynasty. That was
Yeah.
the message that shitty TV was sending to young gay kids and reacting to gay people coming out in the 70s. They were trying to reassure young gay kids that one day you will meet the woman who turns you straight.
Yeah.
And reassuring parents of gay, effeminate gay
phase.
kids that just hang in there, let them like say they're gay for a while, don't be too jerky
Yeah.
about it, and eventually some pussy will come along and
Like
your son will
being
be
into
fine.
golf.
Right.
He'll get over it, and then he'll start dressing normal. Yeah, it was very, very strange. But you had the show Love, Sydney, if you remember that show.
Briefly. But they de-gayed him.
They did, well, they didn't explicitly say he was gay, but he was. And he said, Tony Randall in interviews promoting the show would say he was.
But in the pilot, I think it was explicit.
It was.
And then they ran from it.
Yeah.
And just made him sort of, I guess he was the first asexual character.
Yes,
on
yeah,
television.
he just doesn't
the
talk about
asexual community should claim Sydney from Love, Sydney
Right.
as their first big TV thing.
True.
But I'm not even sure they were aware of that show.
No, they probably aren't. And you also, at this time, to put in context for people who are younger than us and don't remember, there were a lot of gay people on TV who were extremely flamboyantly gay.
Paul Lynde.
Liberace,
Charles Nelson
Riley, Tony Randall.
Those were, who wasn't gay?
Was Tony Randall not gay?
No, he was not gay.
Really? I
He
didn't
was
even know.
He was that sort of prim and prissy straight guy. He was getting married and cranking out kids into his 70s and 80s.
Wow. See, I had no idea.
Yeah. Tony Randall,
Yeah.
total.
It was very confusing for
totally
people.
total pussy hound. What was fascinating, though, about Liberace, Charles Nelson Riley, when I was 13 years old, my parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday. 13-year-old, presumed to be straight
Mm-hmm.
boy. And I asked them for tickets to the national tour of A Chorus Line, which was
Right.
coming to the Schubert in Chicago. No straight kid ever asked, no straight boy ever wanted tickets to A Chorus Line
to
for
Bob
his 13th
Fosse.
birthday. Right, yeah. I need to go see those high-stepping chorus boys. And when I came out, my parents were just flabbergasted, shocked. They couldn't have imagined that I was
how
gay.
did you not know?
And I was like, how did you not know? And later they were like, all right, we kind of knew. And it was just, and that's where I flew under the same radar that Liberace was able to fly under. People looked at Liberace and didn't think he was gay, because thinking someone was gay was literally the worst thing you could think of someone, and that meant you were not a nice person. Right. So you didn't let yourself think that of people, because that was not a nice thing, and no nice person would think that. Right. So my parents would look at me and not be able to recognize that I was gay, because they didn't want to be assholes.
And they probably thought it reflected on them in a weird way if they did, because that's
it went even deeper than that. Like we don't want to believe our son is gay because we don't want to feel like failures as parents. Right. We don't want to believe our son is gay because that's something we could never believe about anyone.
We can't even fathom that anyone would be.
Right.
We've heard
unless
about
they
it.
say it, in which case, oh my God.
Yeah.
So people would look at Liberace like, if he says he's not gay, then I don't have to think he's gay. He's not gay.
Yeah.
And my parents looked at me and were like, not gay, not gay, not gay, not gay.
Which is...
As I danced around the living room listening to the 8-track tapes of Chicago and Carousel and Oklahoma.
He's going to make some girl very happy someday. She'll love dance with him. Yeah, because when I talk to younger people and they look at Liberace in a floor-length fur coat talking about his brother George and they're like, nobody? I'm like, nobody even said it. If you said it at a party, someone would punch you.
But that was the deal the culture made for you then. You can be as gay as you want, never tell us, never say it. You can be... There was actually more room for perhaps gender nonconformity for the very brave. Right. And in certain rarefied environments where they were cosseted, there was almost more room for it.
Right. Little Richard.
Another one. Yeah. And you know, Paul Lynde on Hollywood Squares telling really dirty gay jokes.
Very dirty gay jokes.
All the time. And nobody ever said gay.
Yeah. Or even, you know.
I really remember this one time Paul Lynde was on Hollywood Squares and they say when a man falls off a ship, they say man overboard. What do they say when a woman falls off a ship? And he like looked at the camera and went full speed ahead. Yeah. And they're like, what a great joke from this straight man. Hilarious. Let's all go eat some pussy now. The show's over.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Paul Lynde Halloween special he did?
No.
It's Paul Lynde, like it's a total 70s like Judy Garland Christmas style. People are coming over my house kind of special. Special guest Kiss comes in for no reason. Paul Lynde and Kiss just hanging out. It's very, very odd. And it's something that could only happen in the 70s.
I will have to get that and watch it.
Well worth watching. So what else did you have on there after Marty Tyler Moore?
Chips.
So I
had a crush on Erik Estrada.
Is that specifically why you watched it?
Yeah, it was actually not Erik Estrada I had a crush on. It was the blonde one, but I never remember his name.
No one remembers his name ever.
So you have to say Erik Estrada's partner.
Yes, and people go, oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. John something.
Those tall boots.
So like the men in uniform was the thing. Yeah. Do you remember So I grew up like a punk rock kid, and I always was drawn to the punk rock scare episodes of things. Mm-hmm. And there was a fantastic punk rock scare episode of Chips where they have to go undercover as punks and bust this, I think it's a drug ring. And there's a scene where Erik Estrada is practicing slam dancing in the locker room, and he's like in his underwear slamming against the lockers. Yeah. They're like, what are you doing, Punch? And he's like, I got to practice this slam dancing stuff, man. It's really, really weird and
now
fantastic.
He's a right-wing reactionary.
Yeah, absolutely.
What happens to people? John Schneider from Dukes of Hazzard, right-wing reactionary.
I think they get a bit of money, and when people get older, they seem to go either more liberal, where they're like, I've been around a long time, stuff doesn't matter, let it go. Or they get terrified, where they're just like, the world is changing and everyone's going to kill me. Mm-hmm. We have to just lock everybody up. And I know very few elderly people in the middle. Yeah. They're always extremes.
I wonder which side of the fence I'm going to land on as I hurtle towards old age.
I think you'll probably go right-wing extremism.
No, I don't think it's possible.
No one would believe it. What else you got?
We should pause for a moment to celebrate all the hair that I fell in love with in the 70s and 80s. You know, Leif Garrett had that huge mop of hair. Mm-hmm. And really growing up then, and, you know, puberty at that point, you sort of imprint on certain styles. Leif Garrett's hair, Shaun Cassidy's hair, the other Hardy Boy, whatever his name.
I think it was also Cassidy, wasn't he?
No. It was Shaun Cassidy, and used to be married to Kirstie Alley. Can't remember his name.
Oh, yes, I can't remember his name either. The pre-Scientology Kirstie Alley.
Yeah. So big shaggy mops of hair on dudes, both the guys on Dukes of Hazzard.
Yep. That Bay City Rollers
Even the blonde dude on Chips had sort of shaggy hair. And to this day, I am like, a guy walks by with a big mop of shaggy hair, and my reptile imprinted on in puberty
70s
brain
hair.
just goes,
Yeah.
must fuck that.
That's a weird hairstyle that never managed to come back despite all of the revival in the 70s revival in the 90s. No one really got that sort of 70s shag hairdo
Rarely
right.
can guys pull it off.
Yeah.
What's his face had it for a little bit because he had to, because he was in that 70s show.
Oh, Ashton Kutcher.
Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah.
So-
But he even still had like a weird 90s skater version of it. It didn't have the feathering.
Yeah, it
The
didn't have-
layering was missing.
Yeah, that's true.
In the pairing with the sideburns that just sort of peek out under the
I don't like the sideburns. I like the early Leif Garrett,
Early
Shaun Cassidy,
pre-sideburns Leif Garrett.
pre-sideburns.
It's always interesting to see guys like Elvis in movies like Change of Habit when he's sort of adopting that kind of look at the time.
Or baseball players in the 70s when they
Yes.
started growing their hair out, growing facial hair,
Yes.
under the orders of baseball team managers because they wanted baseball to seem more hip.
You need that youth vote.
Yeah, you need the youth in the stand. They need to attract new and younger fans. So they had them all. They literally had team managers, team owners had players grow their hair out
To be a pinup.
to be a pinup, and it worked for me.
Have you ever seen the fuckface baseball card? The
No.
infamous fuckface baseball card? So I am not a sports fan at all, but this one I always found hilarious. And there's a player whose name I can't remember, but if you Google fuckface baseball card, it'll come up. And in his photo, he's holding the bat, and on the bottom of the bat, fuckface is written.
Right.
And it's because, we need to Google this. And it's because, the guys on the team used to play jokes on him and nobody checked. And this card was printed in hundreds of thousands of kids' baseball card packages.
Wow.
So there were kids all over America in the 70s with a very legible fuckface baseball card.
Are those worth money?
They're not so much now. Actually, the one that's worth money is they airbrushed it out and reprinted them, and there's so many fewer of those that they're worth money. But the fuckface one is worth almost. They're just fantastic. I don't know why it's not a cult hit.
1989, Bill Ripken.
Bill Ripken, that's it. Yes, yeah, it's 89. Wow, yeah, Bill Ripken
that
fuckface card. And he looks very 70s in the picture to me, though. And it's just at the bottom of the bat says fuckface, and nobody noticed
caught it.
for quite a while. Dan's looking at
Oh
the
yeah,
fuckface
I just
card
grabbed
now.
my phone and I'm looking at it right now. And
It's pretty
indeed,
clear.
You can clearly read fuckface written on the knob of the bat.
Yeah, Bill Ripken fuckface baseball card. That should be more of a cult hit, that
More
card.
people should know about
More
this.
people need to know about Bill Ripken's fuckface baseball card. But when you were saying that the managers were like, you got to be hip, I instantly went to like some manager being like, all right, I got an idea here. Put fuckface on the bat. We'll pretend we don't know.
And we will get some attention.
Yeah, this rap music's popular with the kids. So you went with Chips, and then you have Love Boat there.
Love Boat Fantasy Island, which are really kind of a piece.
Yes, Saturday night, 2-hour block.
Escapism.
Did you think that Fantasy Island, did you think that Ricardo Montalban was Satan or God?
I thought he was sadistic.
Yeah, okay. So you didn't think he was either side of the evil coin?
No, I didn't. When I watched that show, I didn't get the impression he was somehow a supernatural power.
Okay.
For me, he seemed just sadistic.
Yeah.
People who are good at S&M, actual sexual S&M, they do is they take somebody who has a certain set of interests or desires and they give those to them.
And then take them away.
No, they don't take them away. You give somebody what they want, and then you give them more of it than they can stand. That's really the secret to good BDSM.
Liberace's too much of a good thing is wonderful.
Exactly, exactly. And that's always what happened. Like, this is your fantasy? Okay, well, here, we're going to, like, give it to you. We're going
Right.
to make this thing happen. And
See, I
you were
wouldn't
not
have-
going to be able to handle it. And that's what the lesson was over and over again. You can't handle what you
Yeah,
want.
it was your dad catches you smoking, smoke a whole cart until you puke.
Yeah.
But it seems to have had a different effect on some people who watched it who were like, seems good.
But here was this authority figure who got off on torturing people.
And some of those episodes are really, really grim. There is, in the pilot, I think, Burt Convey, inexplicable 70s star Burt Convey.
Original Broadway cast of Fiddler on the Roof and Cabaret.
Yeah.
Was a Broadway star before he became
TV's Burt
70s
Convey.
TV guy.
Yeah, host of Win, Lose, or Draw. He plays a magician, escape artist, who just doesn't feel challenged with escape artists. So Ricardo Montalban arranges for him to be put into a Turkish prison and has to escape from the prison. And it's really grim, and that's his fantasy in the pilot. They're like, this is going to sell this show big time.
Oh my God, let's rape Burt Convey.
Burt Convey in a Turkish prison. Family hour.
It'll be like Midnight Express, but a little darker.
Yeah, with a little curlier hair. So were you watching these shows as a family? Were you watching them with, because they're pretty adult.
My parents didn't really watch a lot of television.
Okay.
So it was really the electronic babysitter, boob tube. My parents were always encouraging us to turn it off and not watch so much.
Right.
And yeah, so we didn't watch them as a family. We kind of watched them as kids together. We would pile into a living room or dining room.
Would you have dialogues after? Because I imagine there's some things, like especially Fantasy Island and Love Boat, that I imagine you'd turn to your older brothers and be like, please explain this to me. Some of the things in there.
No, it was really Charlie's Angels. It was Jiggle TV. I would have to look at them and go, why are we watching this?
Yeah, this is so boring.
On some level, this is working for you guys and not for me at all. It's not holding my interest. All I'm seeing are plot holes.
Yeah.
And you guys are clearly seeing something I'm not.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to have some people on the show who were cast members on Battle of the Network Stars, which I intrinsically link with Charlie's Angels. And they explicitly told me the network had a no bras rule.
Oh my God.
So some guy in a suit was like, no bras on this when you're doing the paddle boat. And
oh my God.
Yeah. So it was intentional.
When the boob came to TV.
Yes, that was.
Boobs to the boobs tubes.
Which is weirdly, and I think you wrote Three's Company down there as well, some of those shows had a real sleaze to them and a leering,
a dishonest
jiggle.
Sleaze, though. Like it never came through. It was almost like they were, and this isn't an original observation on my part, but they were titillating but holding things with tongs, making fun of people who might be titillated by this while also then titillating.
Right.
Especially Three's Company.
Absolutely.
The horny landlord was the butt of the joke, but we were all the horny landlords. Everyone watching was the horny landlord.
He was the viewer.
Right, he was the viewer. And the viewer didn't know that he was the viewer.
They're laughing at themselves.
Yes. The viewer didn't realize in what contempt the network and the producers and the writers held them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like the people who I always say watched All in the Family wrong, who are the people who are like, Archie Bunk is the best. And it's like, no, you're supposed to be laughing at him. Yeah.
Fuck that meatball.
What? He's correct. Don Knotts as a character, I was talking to a friend this week and I said, you would never get horny Don Knotts on TV now. Like, no one would be like, let's get a Don Knotts guy who's just constantly horny in a sitcom for families.
Yeah, I don't think you would.
No, some 62-year-old man who they all knew from a show from their childhood who's all like, oh yeah, let me get that.
Well, he was later in Three's Company, right?
Right. He was the second one from the Ropers, who were also horny all the time. The wife was always pursuing.
And the homophobia on that show was hilarious.
Yes.
The gayest character on TV was John Ritter's character Jack, pretending to be gay, so that he could work around the morality clause in his lease and live with these two girls who he wanted to fuck but never got to fuck. And the landlord wanted to fuck them and never got to fuck them. And the landlord would make really homophobic jokes, which weren't treated as the problem with the landlord. The problem was he was making homophobic jokes at the expense of somebody who wasn't actually a homo. And that was where the humor was. Not that there was anything wrong with making the jokes. And they would have been completely appropriate if Jack had actually been a gay dude. But Jack, we knew, the audience knew, wasn't a faggot.
Hilarious.
So how funny is that?
Well, that was a weird trend where it was totally okay to pretend to be gay for cheap rent. There were 4 or 5 shows that had that plot line. Like,
really?
Do you remember Bosom Buddies?
Where they were just in
drag.
They were
gay, but they were just in drag. But for the, your average American viewer, a guy in a dress, gay. For the M.A.S.H kind of, guy trying to get out and all that stuff. It's like, it's okay to pretend to be gay or dress like a woman or whatever, as long as it's for getting a good deal on an apartment.
Then you can do it.
Very American there. Yeah, very, very strange. And that was the first show I remember that would kind of explicitly mention gay because he was trying to get cheap rent. Really,
I never saw that show. I never watched
Bosom Buddies. Is okay, but
whatever happened to Tom Hanks anyway? Wasn't he one of the stars?
Well, I think Peter Scolari has him as his assistant now. A funny story was Julia Duffy did the show, who was on Newhart, and Peter Scolari was on that as well. And the first day Peter Scolari was at the table read, Bob Newhart turned to the executive producer and said, "I wanted the other guy from Bosom Buddies just fucking with him." And he was like, "Oh no," and he's like, "I'm just messing with you."
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
It was great. So what else do you have on there? I see what do we got? Love Boat, Fantasy Island, SNL.
Were
you a diehard SNL
Yeah,
person?
Absolutely. That just felt like a window into this adult world that we weren't supposed to be able to peer through.
Right.
one of my parents' not most treasured possessions, but something they had in the house that we were forbidden to know about or look at or listen to was George Carlin's comedy albums, 7 Words You Can't Say on Television, and some others, and some Bill Cosby albums. And we would sneak into the living room sometimes when our parents weren't home and listen to these comedy albums and not quite understand them. And SNL was sort of at its best in the 70s, and then the 80s began to fall apart, right?
Yeah.
It was that George Carlin comedy album that we didn't quite understand, but that clearly we were at a party we weren't supposed to be at.
Right. It's funny. Now I just have to figure out why.
Right, exactly. And sort of reverse engineer what adult life is all about based on the clues laid out for us by Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi and Gilda Radner. And
were you watching from the first year?
Yeah, we watched. I remember watching that first episode that George Carlin hosted. Yeah, we watched all of those.
Very strange.
And then we never quite got the fact that, oh, this is, naughty and adult that we're watching this. And like, no. Adults are actually out on Saturday night.
Right.
Adults aren't at home in front of the television on Saturday night.
Yeah.
This is kids and middle-aged people watching this crap on Saturday night.
Not young people that they think
young
they're
people.
talking to.
People the age group of the performers were not home watching this stuff.
No. And the quote I always, and again, I need to properly attribute this to whoever said it, but there's a definitive answer to what the best season of SNL was, and it's inarguable. And it's whatever season you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
Because that's who it's for. It's for 12-year-olds, and it's smart for 12-year-olds. It's that National Lampoon kind of thing, but it's still, a 25-year-old is going to be living that stuff, so they don't need to see it, and someone older is going to go, I don't understand what this is.
It's to be performed by 25-year-olds, watched by 12-year-olds, and dismissed by 50-year-olds.
Exactly. And that, I think, is what their slogan is this year.
Yeah.
So you're watching it when, like, Albert Brooks was doing short films, and the Muppets were part of it before the sort of Muppet Show.
Andy Kaufman was hosting.
Very weird, subversive stuff that I think people have difficulty putting in context now, where that show is such an institution and is essentially the man of comedy now in a lot of ways, that it really was something that was under the radar and getting away with a lot of stuff.
And just fucking around. It felt like we're not, those original seasons felt, and I'm not an SNL historian, which is now a thing, there are books, but those original seasons had this kind of whatever the fuck, we have maybe 2-3 years to do this and then we're out.
Yeah.
And so might as well throw everything at the wall and might as well be as shitty and naughty as possible. Right. Now when I watch it, it seems to be coloring within the lines. Yeah. And those lines are, the place they have to cover is broad. Like they have a broad parameter, but you just never get the sense that when you watch SNL now that something super fucked up could possibly happen.
It's much more measured. They created the rules and now they follow them.
Yeah.
But we watched them creating the rules, and it was always uneven, but it was more exciting.
I was thinking about that Hurricane Katrina fundraiser where Mike Myers, who was from SNL, was standing next to Kanye West, and Kanye West said George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Which would have happened on SNL in 1975.
Right. It was a very 75, 77 SNL moment. But that wouldn't happen on SNL now.
No. And Mike Myers was sort of the quintessential SNL company man.
Yeah.
Like, you went off script. We can't believe it. And it's like,
and he was petrified by it.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't have that sense of anarchy that I think that someone like Bill Murray, who people worship now for that, where he's like, what's he going to do? We don't know. That was the kind of thing, even though it was, a scripted show.
It really was the id of television at that time.
Absolutely.
Like, everything else was the ego. And very controlled, all these other shows and the way they were packaged and presented. And there was something anarchic about it.
If you look at it compared to Laugh-In, which was a show aimed at youth and was supposed to be
It was packaging youth culture for their parents.
Exactly.
And making it seem like a goofy lark.
Exactly.
If Richard Nixon can show up...
Yeah. It's not a youth culture show. But SNL had drawn from, the Harvard Lampoon, National Lampoon, these underground movements, Second City, which was still only less than 20 years old when they were pulling people out of it, and was able to have that counterculture all the way back to like bebop people pull into this show. And I don't think there's that world to draw from now because it's been bled dry. Things aren't given time to sort of develop on their own. They're either instantly out there and burned out. And so you can't do it again.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that voice comes from, or with an endorsement from a major network, whether they know they're endorsing it or not. So did you have a bedtime? You could just stay up and watch it?
On Saturday night, we could stay up and watch it. But we lived in Chicago, so it was on at 10:30.
Oh, right. That's what I said before we started talking. I said to Dan, I was always jealous of the people in the Central Zone. Yeah, because you could watch the 10 o'clock shows before bedtime, and it just wasn't fair.
Right.
You know, I couldn't always
When
watch
I moved to
Fantasy
the
on.
West Coast, I was like, what? SNL? Or this is on at 11? I have to stay up till 1 o'clock in the fucking morning to watch SNL?
People crazy? Don't you have things to do tomorrow?
To get up. I have to go to church.
What's under SNL there?
Alice?
Alice.
A working class sitcom.
It was something about Alice. And a few people.
For those
have said this.
you just assume everyone knows what Alice was.
Alice was a spin-off, weirdly, of a dramatic movie, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which was Martin Scorsese, I think.
I have no idea.
And it was about a woman who kind of just runs away and starts working at this cafe.
Flees a bad marriage with her kid.
Which is pretty progressive and was very 70s. The single mom.
Works at Mel's
Mel's
Diner. Kiss my grits,
with
Mel.
Flo, whose spin-off I detested.
I never saw Flo's spin-off.
So this was my problem with Alice, and what became my problem with Flo. Growing up in Boston, I had this like visceral aversion to Southern shows, and it was just in my being for whatever reason. Hee Haw would come on, and I'd be like, I don't like I couldn't.
We had that same reaction in Chicago.
I imagine you would as well. And Alice kind of put that. Triggered that in me where it's like and Flo was even more of it because she was so incredibly Southern. And Alice was an interesting thing because it was still in first run when I was a kid in the mid 80s, but it was very interesting, and especially revisiting now, seeing these 70s shows as they stretched into the 80s and not fitting in right. And you saw these very 70s characters in a very 70s situation
kind of marooned in the 80s.
And Facts of Life was another one of those, and in Diff'rent Strokes and these shows that the transitional years shows that
Diff'rent Strokes was totally a Reagan fantasy.
Absolutely.
Here comes the white rich guy in the limousine, and he's going to do right by these poor black kids.
Yes.
And we just have to let all the individual rich white people make it right. We can't collectively take action.
Slavery's not
Social
so bad.
justice is not something a nation does. Social
Yeah.
justice is something an individual millionaire bestows upon
Absolutely.
a couple of black kids.
And they don't quite get it. They don't take to it. It's
And they need raisin.
Yeah.
They need fathering.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that show.
I mean, the 80s, we had very odd Reagan phenomenons with orphans, which were there was 20 sitcoms about orphans, which is every kid's biggest fear
And biggest fantasy.
And
it's every
fantasy.
Disney movie.
Yeah.
Bambi's an orphan.
Yeah.
Dumbo's an orphan.
True. Well, orphans or these aren't my real parents, I'm actually a princess from another dimension kind of shows. But you had
Really?
Webster.
Me too? Oh,
yeah,
you're
everybody
talking
has
about
it.
TV?
Yes,
I
it's
thought
true.
you were-
Yeah.
I thought you were just,
Yes.
like,
Wildfire.
sharing.
Here's where I say it, everybody. It's true. But there were,
I'm a princess from another dimension.
Yes,
I'm
there
going
were
to put that on my business card.
maybe 3 shows about that for real. There was one, and I loved this show as a kid, and my father was very upset about it. And I'm a straight man, and it was a show called Wildfire. It was a cartoon, and it was about this girl who was an orphan and was adopted by some like abusive ranch asshole who was getting money or something. I don't know why he adopted her. And her horse was magic and talked and was the voice of John Vernon from Animal House, and took her to this other dimension where she was the heir to this throne that her real mother was imprisoned by an evil princess, and she would have to go back to the real world.
Was the
and-
character's name Sherry Potter?
It was Sherry
What
Potter.
the fuck?
It's basically Harry Potter, yes, yeah. But it's been totally forgotten for whatever weird reason. But yeah, you had Reagan, you had Webster, where it was we adopted this kid, and then you had all the weird shows that wanted to sort of be about interracial relationships. Like there's a cover here with Give Me a Break, where Nell Carter and Dolph Sweet, who basically were a married couple on this show, but she was their old housekeeper that inherited his children when his wife died, because you can't just have them be married.
As one does.
Or shows like Kate and Allie, which I'm like, this is basically a show about a lesbian couple.
Middle-aged women who'd been in straight relationships, straight marriages, and had kids, then coming out as lesbians and setting up house.
Yeah.
That's a really common phenomenon. That I kind of read the show, Kate and Allie.
Yeah, I even did too, and I'm like,
it was a really
pretty
good show.
explicit. It's a great show, and was a really nice relationship show. So I think even within that Reagan context, there were some things that managed to slip in a good way.
But Kate and Allie was also a really deeply sex-negative show, because one of the things it posited, we could see, well, the ultimate sort of realization of this idea would be let them be the lesbians.
Right.
But part of what it said in not letting them be lesbians is relationships work best when we can take sex out of them.
Were we just friends?
Sex is the problem in the relationship, not the absence of sex.
Right.
But the presence of it. And if you can have a couple where there's no desire, no sex, no lust, that's the ideal couple.
Like the Reagans.
Like the Reagan. Ronnie and Mommy.
I still believe they never did it, even though they have children. So
I've met Ronald Reagan Jr.
Yeah, I think he's test tube Ronald Reagan
No,
Jr.
I think
he hosted SNL in 1985.
Really?
Yeah, and he had a comedy special on Showtime, the Ron Reagan comedy special.
Oh my God!
Because he became him and Patty. What's her name? Her first
Hearst?
Not Patty
Duke?
Hearst. No, Patty who was
Smith.
Patty Smith. Patty Smythe from Scandal, the Warrior, who was Reagan's wife's first daughter, or she posted in Playboy around that time. Her name was whatever Nancy Reagan's maiden name is. I can't remember now. But they were sort of coming on the 80s as being anti-Reagan, and Ron Reagan Jr. would go on and do these weird subversive things in a comedy context because it was okay to say it there, which was kind of also.
And now he's a flaming table pounding liberal.
Yeah,
and really smart.
Yeah, I think that's what that was his revenge and
out.
reaction to get out of there. He had to go all the way out. So what else did you have on there? Underneath, we have SNL, and then we had
Brady
Alice.
Bunch, Muppet Show. Brady Bunch was off the air then. It was in repeats.
Reruns. Yeah, it was one of the first. So Sherwood Schwartz, who created that show, and Gilligan's Island, made so much money on syndication. He was the first syndication billionaire. None of the people on the show saw that money.
Oh, that's too bad.
Which is why in the 80s, people started getting rich from syndication because they redid all the contracts, which now you can't do either. But the people who had that sweet spot of the 80s never work again money was mostly because of the Sherwood Schwartz deals for Gilligan's Island and Brady Bunch.
Gilligan's Island I watched constantly.
What a terrible show.
It was but it was a perfect little amuse-bouche. It was a perfect little. It was what it was.
Yeah,
and
it never
was so
pretended-
self-contained and stupid and perfect. And my older brother had a crush on Ginger. I know a lot of gay guys my age who had a crush on the professor.
Oh, really? Well, he is like
Sort of a handsome, square-jawed
Yeah.
dude. I never had a crush on him. His hair wasn't shaggy enough for me.
Right.
He didn't look like a ballet dancer in the back pages of After Dark magazine, so it didn't work.
Despite being on a desert island, he was always very well kept.
Yeah, well, how many ball gowns did Ginger take on that 3-hour cruise?
Yeah, I know. She very, very odd. That show, I feel like, was one of those shows that literally had no subtext. It was like the most superficial. Yep, this is a show.
It was farce. It was.
Yeah.
It was.
It's a cartoon.
And good farce. It was like, 17th century Italian farce, Roman farce. It was just like, here are these characters in a Seinfeldian sort of way. Nobody hugs, nobody learns.
Right.
Nobody changes, nobody grows.
They run around and hit each other with hats, and then the next episode it's the same thing. But Brady Bunch did have some lessons in there in a weird way. And again, a family that was after divorce, although I don't remember if
they
it's
were both
explicit. Were they
widows.
both widowed? That's
Widow and
okay.
widower.
Dead's okay, not remarried. But very much a touchstone for a whole generation. And to the point I was going to make earlier is that reruns often were more of a part of your soul as a kid because they were often on in a full hour, and so many latchkey kids saw it every day when they were alone in their TV time, where they would just soak it in as much as possible.
Yeah, first run Brady Bunch, which I was just old enough to remember, was once a week.
Yep.
But then when everything went into syndication, you could watch Brady Bunch every day after school, and people did.
Yeah.
And binge on Brady Bunch, which I don't recommend.
No, unless you have unless you want to try to get disability. I think you could put that in. Yeah.
Diabetic shock, have your legs amputated by the end of that week.
The weirdest thing was because that show became such a huge hit in syndication again, 8 years after the show was off the air, the Brady Bunch hour came into effect.
Which is take the Brady Bunch, add LSD,
Yeah.
post SNL becoming an institution, and just regurgitate up this insane, amazing garbage.
Thanks to Bruce Valanche as one of the writers.
To try to milk 10 more bucks out of the whole enterprise.
Yeah, with a fake Jan. I think Jan was fake.
Yeah,
there was
Jan
one
did not
fake.
come
There was a
back.
fake Jan.
Jan
Eve
did not
Plum
come back.
was saying, "I won't do it."
And good for her.
Yeah.
If only, not because, she shouldn't have to do it if she didn't want to do it, but good for her also because then we have fake Jan to talk about. And where is
Exactly.
she now?
I don't know where fake Jan is. I should try to hunt down, because there was a fake Jan, and then when they brought the Bradys back in 1990 as a drama series called The Bradys, an hour-long drama in the wake of 30-something, which is crazy.
I have not heard of
You
this.
should check it out. It
In
started
1990,
1990.
I was living in Europe, so I missed this.
It probably didn't make it over to Europe, but they did a very Brady Christmas, and it was a 2-hour dramatic movie about the Bradys. Bobby's a race car driver.
But of course he is.
Of course he is. And it was very dramatic, and it was a huge hit. So they brought it back as a mid-season replacement as the Bradys, and it was an hour-long drama, but they had a fake Cindy. And so we could pull together like a whole fake
Fake
Brady
Jan,
Green.
fake
Yeah,
Cindy.
I think there might have been a fake Marsha. And thinking about it now, talking about it, there's been a version of the Bradys in almost every decade, because we had the Brady Bunch hour in the late 70s, in the 80s-ish. The 90s, you had the movies, which were a totally different take on it. And it's become this weird like archetype that seems to reflect the times.
Somebody is going to go out there and pitch a Brady grandkids show.
Yes.
Where Florence Henderson, who's still alive,
Yep.
rattling around out there selling canola oil, she comes back and she is the grandmother, and it's the kids of, maybe she has a lot of grandchildren, and then all the actual, so you don't have to have a fake Jan, a fake Cindy.
They all died.
They all died in a car wreck
Yeah.
where all of her kids and Mike's kid, and of course Mike died of AIDS,
Yep.
all their kids are dead, but she then inherits 6 beautiful grandchildren.
Yes. And one of them actually, thinking about it, talking about the Diff'rent Strokes thing, one of the people on the Brady's in the 90s had a black kid. And that was like a big deal. Bobby, I think it was like his ex was black, and they had a kid and he left.
Oh my God.
And it was
how
such dramatic. What else do we have on there? You got the Brady Bunch.
The
we have
Muppet Show.
Muppets. So Muppets, speaking of anarchy.
And they're back.
Which I don't like.
Yeah.
I
don't think ABC likes it either. They're rebooting the whole show and got a new EP.
My problem with it is the thing about the Muppets was it was anarchic but always sincere. And the best way to sum up the Muppet Show was someone tries to sing a song and a monster interrupts them. That was pretty much everything on the Muppets, but it had this, you learned a whole history about showbiz, sort of pre-television on it.
Yeah, not burlesque.
Vaudeville. Yeah, and it had this sincerity to it. And I think that Jim Henson was one of the most subversive people to ever be able to make mainstream television and fit in all these left-wing ideas in a whole generation. And the last thing he did, which was a show called Dinosaurs, which he was working on when he died, was about how human beings are fucking up the world. And the last episode of Dinosaurs, they all freeze to death in a new ice age they created through pollution. This was a children's show on ABC. The baby on the show, the last line in the show is, "Are we going to die?" And the dad's like, "I don't know, son." And he got away with it. They do. They freeze to death, and people complain, and he was like, "They're dinosaurs. They are extinct." And the fact that he got all this stuff out there is incredible. And without him, it's all about references and snark and, awkward and, "oh, no, you didn't" kind of stuff. And it misses that heart.
Yeah.
And I think it was tied to a very specific person. And
the original Muppet Show was so out of time, out of place, but within living memory. There were people out there who, of course, had performed in vaudeville. There were vaudeville audiences out there where there's still some like vaudeville scraps here and there in the culture in the 70s when the original Muppet Show went on. So what they were reviving, the art form they were reviving with the original Muppet Show and sending up and being inside and outside of at the same time was still part of the living cultural memory. And now we're so far from that it's not. There's a lot that was on television concurrent with the Muppet Show that was vaudeville. The Carol Burnett Show really was vaudeville.
Absolutely.
All
the variety shows.
Yeah. And there were tons of performers who were still on television, many of them on game shows who were old vaudeville performers. So that was all still kind of present. Now, with the new Muppet Show, they tried to like send up late night TV. But what is late night TV? And it's just not as rich a vein to mine as really vaudeville and that style of performance was. And so what do they got? Like, you can't parody vaudeville anymore because nobody remembers it.
No.
There's not a performance tradition that you can tap back into
that has decades and decades of history as well. And I think that the parody and the way they were able to dissect it is because they truly loved that stuff. And I feel like so few...
Sometimes that's what you do with parodies. Then you get to revive, or satire, camp, or drag. You get to revive an art form in a way where you're, like I said, inside and outside of it at the same time. But there has to be a love for it.
Right.
And there doesn't seem in the new Muppet Show to be a love for the genre that they're parodying.
Right. And that's when, it's almost back to Roseanne. We can make fun of the thing that we love, and it's genuine and it's loving, and it comes from a place that's not hateful because we love this person and even though we're shitting on them, as opposed to let's just be snarky and point at that person and laugh, which I feel like a lot of media has moved towards instead of this true love and respect for.
It's harder to create a character like Miss Piggy today than 30 years ago. I don't know, like Miss Piggy now just seems like a bitch.
Yeah.
And Miss Piggy then seemed like strategically bitchy. I don't know what the difference was.
Or sort of crazy, like in a fun way, like just bonkers, where you were like, oh.
And are we all crushed by Kermit getting a new pig girlfriend?
Yeah, that's messed up. That's messed up. And also, all right, a pig and a frog, I get it. He met her and it worked, but now we know he's just into pigs. Which makes it a little more strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this.
Like a guy who's only attracted to Asian women.
Yeah.
And it's fine. And that's fine if you're only attracted to Asian women, as long as you don't treat them as fetish objects.
Right. But now it's a different thing.
Yeah, but it feels a little. But the bar is set a little higher. You're going to come in for a little bit more scrutiny. If all your girlfriends have been Asian, people are going to look at you and go, I hope you're not fetishizing Asian women. I hope that you see them as three-dimensional human beings with lives and desires of their own, and not just fleshlights.
Can we pitch this reboot for the Muppets? Someone sits down with Kermit and is like,
it's like, dude,
pigs, all of them?
All your girlfriends have been pigs.
Yeah, I think that has to happen. Absolutely. Anything else we missed on there?
No, I think we got everything. M.A.S.H.
M.A.S.H. was always too old for me.
It was gasping, right? At that point, or was it in reruns?
It was still on. I think it ended in 81 or 82, and then became after M.A.S.H. and Trapper John M.D., none of which were very good.
Yeah.
But again, a subversive show about the Vietnam War, but about, quote-unquote, the Korean War that went on longer than the Korean War did. And
another show that was in reruns a lot then that I saw a lot was Hogan's Heroes.
Yes.
Oh, I know. This is a good idea for a sitcom. A German prisoner of war camp.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wacky Germans.
I don't think that would fly today. Those incompetent, wacky Germans. You know what they were? You know what they were the least competent at? Running camps.
Yeah.
They really sucked at that. Let's make fun of them for that.
And Hogan was all like, they're good guys. It's just some fun. It was very fratty. It was kind of like
despicable.
Hazing.
It was despicable.
And the craziest thing about that show to me, not that far in time from
the
actual
event.
World War II. Could you imagine setting a wacky sitcom in the 2003 Iraq invasion now? Like a total wacky, we're in one of Saddam's palaces that we're occupying and we have his
Someone
servants.
just tried that with a drama, right? There's
Did they?
drama that was some
probably.
came and went,
Yeah.
some Middle East country despot son.
Can you imagine like a 3-camera wacky sitcom of that? That wouldn't even fly on like Adult Swim these days.
But let's circle back before we end to
Yeah.
Leif Garrett's hair when he was
Absolutely.
the boyfriend, recurring role as the boyfriend of Kirsty McNichol,
Yeah.
who had the same hair.
Yes.
Like the two of them should have mated and produced the perfect kind of hair peoples.
Did you ever see Little Darlings?
Yeah.
That
Another film that couldn't be made today.
God, no. Yeah, I mean, that's whenever I think of Christy McNichol, that's the Christy McNichol.
Little
that I
white
think
kids
of.
throwing the N-word around.
Yeah, while they're trying to race to lose their virginity. And then
They're 14.
Yeah, and then she went on to play the sort of wacky Republican daughter of Richard Mulligan on the show Empty Nest in the 90s. That's how
How do you know all this?
I don't know. I watch so much TV. I don't want to know it. It's like some weird curse. But that, I think if you compare those two things, kind of the theme we've been talking here is as you see the culture shift and you look at very specific character actors to see what role they had in the 70s versus the same person in the 90s, that's it. It's spelled out for you there. And it's kind of fascinating.
You can
and
trace
sad.
the cultural history of those decades.
Exactly.
By taking like probably a half a dozen actors and just who were they in 1980, who were they in 1990, who were they in 2000 on TV if they were cast, lucky enough to be cast.
Yeah, and there are a few. There are a few that definitely made it through, Leif Garrett not being one of them.
Being one of them.
Did you have Leif Garrett pinups?
And his hair didn't make it through either.
No, it definitely didn't.
Dude went bald.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah, but he still doesn't know how to button a shirt properly, so he's... Did you buy his records and do all that?
I didn't listen to his music.
Which is probably why you liked him.
Probably. But I didn't listen to anybody's music. I only like musical comedies.
Okay.
So I always tell people that imagine if you hated the sound of the French horn and popular music all your life since
Only
age 10
French horn.
is 3 assholes with French horns and 1 fucker on drums.
Yeah.
Like I just started tuning.
Yeah, like I don't need to hear this.
So yeah, I don't
Chorus
need
lines on.
AC/DC or Kiss or the Rolling Stones even or the Beatles. Like just none of it
none of it clicked with you.
clicked with me.
Yeah, interesting. And
I was literally listening to Camelot and Carousel in Oklahoma.
really?
Yeah.
Still?
Yeah, still.
Wow. What do you think of some of the live things that they've been airing of like, The Wiz
it's wonderful
and
to see more attention paid to musicals. It's sort of like Glee did it for a while,
right?
But the way they performed everything was so awful.
Yeah.
And then this, Live Wiz, live Sound of Music. I think it's good. I think it's good for the art form. It's good to see it popularized. It'll be interesting to see now that they're doing Hairspray whether Hairspray can survive Black Twitter.
Yeah,
because Hairspray is one of those films, one of those movies, plays that puts white people at the heart of the civil rights movement and makes white people the hero.
Right.
Tracy Turnblad founds the civil rights movement.
She's a hair
in
hopper.
the same way that Michael, what's his face's character from Back to the Future.
Oh, Michael J. Fox founds rock and roll,
Yeah,
not black people.
Not black people.
No, absolutely
like
not.
he
Yeah.
picks up an electric guitar and black people hear what this white kid's doing and they copy it from him.
That's science fact. Everybody knows that's what happened.
And Hairspray is the same thing, just about the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And I'm just really going to be curious to see how that's received.
I mean, even, again, when we were talking about actors that you look at in the decades, look at John Waters, the most 70s gay subversive filmmaker you could think of.
Eating dog shit.
89 fluke hit with Hairspray, which was a sanitized version of John Waters. Huge musical, huge movie, now on mainstream ABC television. Unbelievable that we've gone.
And John Waters himself all the way decrying assimilation and how boring gay people are now.
Yeah.
And acting as if he stands outside that assimilationist sort of stream and dullness thing.
Right.
So John Waters cashing the checks for...
I'm okay with John Waters having some money.
No, I'm okay with John Waters having money too. Just like John Waters needs to kind of own it a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
This thing that he's condemning and decrying, he has also benefited from handsomely.
America.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for doing the show.
My pleasure. It was really fun. I hope John Waters' ninja assassins don't come kill me in my sleep now.
No, that's fine. Although he is in Chinatown often.
Oh, baby, I see you in my TV set, yeah, baby, I see you in my TV set. I cut your head off and put it in my TV set.
Well, there you go. Dan Savage, we both learned about fuckface bats. We learned a lot today. And also that Kermit has a weird pig thing. I hadn't really thought about it out loud, but of course it makes perfect sense now. You can check out Dan at the Savage Lovecast. I first heard Dan, didn't hear him. I read him when he was writing his column, and it was syndicated here in the Boston Phoenix locally, which if you are a regular listener of the show, you know is a very important weekly alternative newspaper in my life. And so it was great to be able to speak to him. I will put up all links to his social media stuff on tvguidancecounselor.com. You can also go on tvguidancecounselor.com and sign up for our mailing list and hear about live shows. I don't send out that many emails, but when I do, they're doozies. You can email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or at ken@icanread.com. You can tweet to us at TV Guidance or search TV Guidance Counselor on Facebook and join our community there if you like the page. If this is the first time you checked out the show, thank you so much. I think you will enjoy episodes, so go back on iTunes, look at some of the guests I've had, listen to some other episodes. Let me know what you think. You can also rate and review the show or email me with guest requests or any questions you may have. Also, if you want to check out my stand-up comedy, you can go to icanread.com. And I am currently in Los Angeles, although I'm based in Boston. I have escaped for a couple weeks during the winter, so I'm doing some shows out there, including recording my first full-length stand-up album, which will be at the Nerd Melt showroom on Monday, February 8th. It's a free show. I have Greg Proops and Laura Keitlinger doing some sets on the show. They were nice enough to help me out there, so you can come see them and stick around and see me do a long set. Or if you are unable to make it, you can check out my last EP, which is called Pilot Season. It's only $3.99 on Bandcamp, but you can get it for more money on iTunes or Amazon or wherever fine digital music is sold. So we have a brand new episode every single Wednesday, so be sure to be here then for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
I need to go see those high-stepping chorus boys, suck the dicks of the Koch brothers, ultimately. We should pause for a moment to celebrate all the hair that I fell in love with. But we were all the horny landlords.